Mr. Tim Bass, welcome to the Rich Equation podcast.
Thank you, Ashish. Thank you.
I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. You know, Tim works with entrepreneurs all across the country in many, many different industries. And we connected here a few months ago, and you were just such a fascinating guy. And I think we had some really good, stimulating conversations really early on. And I felt like, you know, some of the lessons you were talking to me about and some of the things I was learning, I was like, people need to hear this. So I'm just really excited to dig deep with you today.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Let's kind of start right hot and heavy in purpose. I think a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with this concept of finding purpose. I know I can speak to this, and that entrepreneurs have chip on the shoulder that they're chasing something for a long part of their life, and some of it is what makes them successful. But we're often not trained to think about how to drive with purpose or be purpose driven and start with that process, and we end up finding that much later. And I know you work with a lot of entrepreneurs on this specific subject, so I'd love for you to talk about what you're learning about this subject and, you know, how you help others find clarity about what their purpose is. I know that's a really broad question, but let's start broad.
I love the quote Mark Twain says of the two most important days in our life are the day we're born and the day we find out why. And that's resonated with me for, almost 40 years now of doing this kind of work. And at the same time, what I've found is how difficult that is for people to find that why. In fact, they really struggle. So I've been on a quest for some time now to understand that at, the deepest and broadest levels. And not to overgeneralize, but as I've engaged with people over the years, for the most part, I found kind of two groups of people. One is people who've been highly successful by the world standards and made a lot of money and built companies or whatever it might be. But when I work with them, there's a lot of pain, a lot of confusion, and frankly, they're not as happy as I would have thought they would be given their circumstances.
Right.
So that maybe early on surprised me or shocked me. And so I'm like, what is that about? And then there's a lot of this other group of people that are kind of content and at peace and happy or on some level. And yet they weren't as successful, which has created issues for them. They didn't have as much money as they would like or whatever it might have been. And so over the years and just looking at every aspect of that and talking through that with people, what I found in the third group, which was a lot more rare and frankly very rare, is that they were both, that they were highly successful across the board in the areas that that mattered to them, and felt deeply centered and fulfilled on purpose, deliberate around the things that matter most to them and in a way that impacts the people they care about the most. And so I'm like, what is that about? And what are the characteristics of those people? And so probably to sum it up, it is when we know who we are and what we believe or why we do whatever we do, the decisions around how and what are easy. So, and there's a lot in that, who and why. The first problem is that people are being cued to find out why. Even our friend Simon Sinek, and I love, and everything he says in and of itself is, I believe for the most part. And he talks about in history how, the people, organizations that start with why, that start from the inside out, are the people who are influential, who are inspired, who are inspiring, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And yet in the practical work of that, I kept watching people struggle with finding that purpose or why, which is kind of, as I was talking a minute ago, almost a movement. But that movement has caused this other aspect to happen, which is I don't know what my why is. I don't know what my purpose is. And so my work is... Yeah,
it's a stressful question.
That's a stressful question. That's a big ass question. So because the purpose of life is purpose. I forget who said that, and that we give all our heart, mind, and soul to it. Like that is really the meaning of life as I see it. And yet it's difficult for people to do that. So that there's a set of things that need to happen pre-work to identify and that's really the key word here, is who we are. Because what I found is I can't know why I do something if I don't know who I am.
Why do you think, before you go there, why do you think it's so hard for people to do this? Like, why is it such a challenging question, or why are people so afraid of answering this question? I mean, you're about to give us a framework of how to do it, but
yeah. Well, to what I just stated, which is the problem is we have an identity crisis in the world. The people that are charging the capital or that are killing people, here in Memphis, like this guy going around Facebook a couple months ago, just killing people on Facebook Live, and all of that comes from this deep need, and what Maslow said our highest need is, which is acknowledgement of our unique contribution to the world. Like who I am, I'm able to express that in my life, in my work, in my impact in the world. That's our deepest need. And so if I don't know who I am on multiple levels, I'm going to start to do stuff to try to find out, or to try to, at the least whim, if I've got something, I think I could express it through, like charging the capital or whatever it might be. But if you ask people, why are you doing that in the moment? They probably couldn't tell you. Like 9 out of 10 of them wouldn't even be able to tell you. Well, because I believe in Trump, or whatever it is they might say, right? But they don't really know for their own reasons why they're doing such a drastic thing. But they're looking and they're searching and they're trying to find everything. And so these acts of violence to, amazing acts of, by the way, it's not all bad, are a derivative of people trying to search for, where do I connect with this world I live in, this life I'm living? And so so where I trace it back to, and Sinek would say, start with why, and this is the only place that he and I might disagree, is that when you know why you do what you do, you'll know who you are. And everything that I've ever done has told me the opposite. And when I say who we are, it's where my unique strengths, passions, and values align and meet the needs of the world. Therein lies my purpose, my calling, my why. And so any one of those offline means my why is not sustainable for me or the world.
So you mean, what you mean is the who must come first before the why.
Exactly. Like if I don't have, and these, thank God I had a good parents who instilled values in me and so forth. But the reality is a lot of this latest generations haven't had a lot of that guidance, because of whether it be parenting or culture or whatever it might have been. And so they're on this search for, where do I belong? What is this all about? What does it mean? And so if I don't know, and I'm not centered clearly and intensely on who I am on multiple levels, again, specifically starting with what I just stated, like there's nobody like you. If there is on the planet, then why are you here? Like there's no duplicate of us. And so with that uniqueness, how do I find that on an intense level? And so therefore, I believe starting with who is where you start. And frankly, when you do, the why is almost organic. Like it literally just like, oh my gosh, this is what I'm supposed to be doing and how I'm supposed to be doing it. And then of course, aligning how and what you do with that is crucial to accomplish two things. And I call, by the way, both of those pieces, the who and the why is the human being, and the how and the what is the human doing. And so it's about the intense clarity and alignment of all of those: who I am, why I do what I do, how I do it, and what I do on every level. And the two positive outcomes of that are I'm incredibly fulfilled, deeply connected with everything I'm doing, aligning everything I do with that, my conversations, my work, my family, my relationships, all of that with that, which fills me up fully. So I don't go do something to try to think that, that would fill this hole within me, because I know who I am and what I'm about. And then aligning how and what we do, again, makes us highly productive. And so whatever we put our hands to becomes much more productive when we have that clarity. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, it does make sense to me. I think one of the things that's showing up for me is like how what you just said was, starting with why can be a messy process. If you don't know who you are, it can be a messy process, good or bad, right? And I think that by nature maybe be okay as long as it's not harmful to others. But like sometimes being an entrepreneur, you can be messy to try to figure out what you like and what you don't like, to what resonates, what doesn't. But like you said, it's messy. in the framework you're proposing to figure out who you are, what do you do when everything around you, especially in today's age, the world is trying to tell you who you should be and projecting information and imagery on who you should be, what you should think, how you should behave, and it's not really set up to be curious about who you are, and like it's not enabling that those questions, if you know what I mean. Like politically it's pushing you in one direction, socioeconomically, even just all parts of life, it's pushing you somewhere, right? You go on social media, it's imprinting things in your subconscious of who you should be, what you should look like, how you should behave. I don't even know who I am anymore, and I open my eyes and I go, I use the devices and I open the TV. I'm getting farther and farther away from asking that question.
Right.
What do you advise people about that? And do you agree or not?
I totally agree. And I'm something came up when you said that is I'm careful not to completely throw out history or systems or whatever will be
Right.
educational, political, or whatever. Like those have evolved, obviously, and there's been brilliant and amazing people come up with our Constitution and all those kind of things. And so I don't just go, forget that, let's be me. So, but I think our friend Jordan Peterson talks about this, but basically any system, whether it's an education system or a political system or whatever, is structured in a certain way to basically mold people into a certain personality.
Correct.
As opposed to now, so I don't disagree with being a part of those things but as you're engaging education and reading and watching Instagram or whatever else it is, I got to get even more reason why, by the way, in this information age.
Yes, you're right. This is even more important.
Even more crucial that I'm centered, because otherwise I'm going to go off and chase shiny objects and go try stuff. And I've had people tell me many times too, like, well, you kind of, that's just life. And somewhere in your 30s and 40s, you'll find that. I do not agree with that at all, because I just was in a room with a 29-year-old, very successful female entrepreneur, and her 6-year-old son's there. And I literally, in front of her, tried it with her 6-year-old son. I said, you want to see how clear a child is on what they really want? And so I said, Wyatt, come over here. He says, so what do you want for Christmas? I want a Tonka truck. Really? Why do you want a Tonka truck? Because I want to pick up a lot of dirt and make a huge pile. I was like, that's awesome. Why do you want to make a huge pile of dirt? Because I want to stand on top of it and be king of the hill. And literally in a matter of seconds, I'm talking to a 6-year-old, finding out what his real motivations are. And so if you really want to know who you are, you got to take what you do know and trace the source of energy back to its origination and say, that's what matters to me. Like, I don't want this. Why do I have this? I can't want an inanimate object. What I want is I want to feel refreshed. And so what's happening, and people are cueing themselves this way, is they're cueing themselves to noun and verbs. I want to make this much money. I want to build this kind of company. I want to do this. I want to do that.
It's easier.
It creates unintended, well, it's easier to get a hold of because it's on a conscious level. So it's what Simon Sinek said. He said it's harder to get a hold of why, right? Because it's deeper. So, but that's again the work that needs to be done, and do it sooner than later, so that you don't waste your life and waste your work and waste, most importantly, your contribution to the world and your legacy.
What are the questions we should be, what are the line of questioning, or what's the framework to help us get there?
Yeah. So, Before I say it, I want to address an issue, because this is what people are feeling or thinking, even listen to what we're talking about here, and it's a critical part of this. But so I want to talk about that for a second. It's really, frankly, what got me started in this work. Is my very first, at 22 years old, in my first career, had my first mentor friend who adopted me. Very successful, flew me in his private plane to my first business meeting, and I'm just this new wet behind the ears kid. and an amazing father, businessman, human being, etc. And years after that, he took his own life. And it just rocked me to my core of why would a person of that, and he was just an amazing human being. And now, of course, suicide is the leading cause of death for several groups of people in the world. And the reason for that, the only way, I've studied this and I care deeply about it, is the only way that someone can do that is to feel like I have no reason to be here. Like you can't do something that drastic with feeling that. So I then really went on this quest, like, why is that? Why do people not know why they're here and what this is about and why there's meaning and so forth? And so what I call that, and I'm sure you've heard the term, is there's this thing as we say, okay, I want to find my purpose. And this is why I'm saying this now, because as I'm doing that, here's what happens. It's how you described it. It's this uncomfortable, like, okay, how do I do that? And what is that for me? And all this kind of stuff. Anytime
or even as you're doing, you're like, I'm not finding it fast enough, or it's not showing up, or like,
whatever.
Then it's like you get anxious, right?
Yeah. So on the way to do that, we've got to be able to mitigate, manage, understand what I'd call self-defeating thinking. Because anytime I start to say I want to grow, which by the way, I am a proponent of growth as opposed to not, because there is no stagnant. It doesn't exist. That's a law of nature. If you don't grow, you die. Like you don't use your muscles, as I just had surgery, like it atrophies, it gets stiff. It's just a law of nature. So as we choose growth, I want to go from here to there. It's called cognitive dissonance. That's Fessinger. It's internal conflict in me because I am here and I see the 1.0 version of me and I want to get to 2.0 version. Mm-hmm. And so as we do that, what happens is, and this is why I'm saying it now, something kicks in and it's called self-defeating thinking, because now we're pulling from all our past and all that we can imagine in our, what we see in our minds and, our framework. And it's unique for everybody. But we have obstacles. We have things that cloud our ability to get what we want, where we want to go, et cetera. And I just wrap that into the term of self-defeating thinking. So anytime I choose to go from here to here, what kicks in? Like I say, okay, I want to weigh 20 pounds less. Okay. Yeah, but man, I really like cake. Or I really don't want to have to go work out at 5 a.m. in the morning or whatever. And so what starts to happen is that's called learned helplessness. Learned helplessness is essentially why I didn't do it before. I wasn't successful at it. So what would make me think I can be now? And once we have these kind of beliefs wrapped into us, we could believe them even to the point of death. I don't know if I shared that example with you, but I think it was Stanford, but they have these scientists who put a large fish in one half of an aquarium separated by a glass divider, and they put these minnows on the other side, and the fish beats itself against the glass repeatedly for days on end until it finally realizes it can't eat the minnows. And so it stops trying. Well, they're shocked to find that even when they remove the glass and the minnows even swim all around the fish doesn't try to eat the minnows and eventually starves itself to death. Basically, when we believe we can't do something, it's true for us, or whatever that is. And so there's where we have to have the skill, I would say probably is the best word, to, again, minimize, manage, mitigate our self-defeating thinking. Because I can be the most driven person in the world, but if I'm dragging around a couple anchors, it's going to be a lot harder for me to do. And it's proven that self-defeating thinking is twice as powerful as any opportunity for gain.
Yeah, and that's really interesting.
So if I'm a 5 on a scale from 1 to 10 and drive towards a goal, if I'm a 10 and my self-defeating thinking is a 5, I net 0.
I'm neutral. Why is there something physiological? Why is that? Is there something physiological that's happening? Is that just the nature of our
physiological would be after psychological? Yeah.
Psychological.
Well, again, as I'm trying to go from here to wherever I'm trying to grow to, it's my nature typology, my framework, how I see the things, the lens I look through from, how I was born, as well as my nurture and the things that, and my own experiences that have told me, yeah, I've tried that before and I've failed. And so
there's a lot more data points to keep you where you are than to prove why you should be elsewhere.
Well, and what it's doing is simply the obstacle is just clouding my lens, what I'm looking through while I'm trying to go find purpose, meaning, whatever else is I'm trying to create for myself. In this case, we're talking about purpose. It clouds our ability to get there, and we may never get there. And so, let me answer this problem before we go to the next one, because if you can't answer this one, the rest doesn't matter. That's why I'm bringing this up at this point. So as I'm working with people to say, okay, what do you want? Where do you want to go? And what's this about for you? They say, what starts to happen is, yeah, but I really struggle with, and that's the self-defeating thinking coming up, right? Like, I got ADHD. I'm highly disorganized. I, get easily distracted. I struggle with depression. And so, like, literally the list is endless. I have, I have problems, with working on a team. I'm lazy. Now, what's interesting is they take a lot of their experiences and turn them on themselves. Big mistake. Because, like, I can fail, but if I see myself as a failure, I'm now identifying with the failure. And so, key part of that was like, I'm pretty sure I'm not a dad or a parent, but rule number one for parenting is you never associate the bad action with the child. Like, you don't say you're a bad child, you say you're a good child, and that was a bad decision. But we do that to ourselves all the time. And I ask people, would you talk that way to your kids? And they went, hell no. I'm like, well, then what gives you the permission to talk to yourself that way? And so all these things, whether it's, I don't know what to choose, I have too many options, I don't want to come across as XYZ, I care too much about what other people think, all these things that cloud our ability to get clear on who we are, what's important to us, that's what I would call self-defeating thinking. And again, that's essentially what happened to my friend. Here's what I've found, and this is going to sound a little out there, is what if all those, first of all, the first step in understanding this is, what if all those things we could list that get in our way? And I have people actually write out their own.
Yeah, this is a great exercise actually for the listener to just
what's your
write it out.
What are your things that get in anything? If you've tried to be the best athlete or get better grades or whatever, what's gotten in the way? And they say that, and I've collected hundreds of answers. And I said, so what if all these things are not the problem, they're a symptom of a problem? Like, every single thing you could possibly think of that has gotten in the way of you getting where you want or getting where you want to. What if all of those are seen as, and just go with me for a second, what if those are just simply conditions of a problem of one thing that could be completely eliminated or at least significantly minimized to allow you to move confidently towards the things you desire most and this clarity you're seeking? Now, most people, frankly, say, bullshit, that's not impossible, including me. Like, when I first really began to understand this, 20 years ago.
So give me an example. So let's say let's say it's like, oh, I don't have enough time, or I don't know enough people, or I don't know enough information, or whatever the limiting belief is, right? Walk us through it.
I don't have enough time. Is that what you said? I don't have enough time.
I think
I don't know what I need. Yeah.
For me, and I'll be honest here, I guess, there are some things that I'm trying to accomplish in life. Well, I'll be really honest. I've been talking about this on the podcast. I am interested in running a half Ironman. Okay. Yep. And I'm afraid that my body won't hold up. And I've done one before, and I know the training required, and it was super fun, but I'm afraid of injuring myself. I'm afraid of, that's probably what I'm afraid of. And then all the other stuff is like, well, do I have enough time for this? How am I going to balance work and the training? Because it takes about 20 hours a week. So I'm using myself as an example. So help me walk it through.
Yeah, thank you. That makes it real. And by the way, anybody listening, I'd ask for a second, just to think for a second about what are those things for you that got in the way. And then, so let me use this as an example. What if right now, you're at your office, I said, hey, Ashish, you didn't realize this, but I won the lottery this week, and I just want to be generous with the people that I know and really think are cool. And there's somebody waiting outside in the parking lot to give you $10,000 in cash. All you got to do is get up and walk out and get it. What would you do?
Go down and get it.
Sweet. Well, let me just change one condition. There's 2 MMA fighters that are waiting at the door, and you can't use any weapons, but you have to get through them, and they are not held accountable for whatever they have to do to keep you from getting it, including beating you to a pulp.
To death.
What are you going to do? You're like,
I don't know if it's quite worth it.
I'm not sure it's worth it. Now,
okay.
Well, I'm going to put you on the spot, but
no, it's okay.
What is your wife and your children's names?
Oh, Sejal and Simran and Suri.
Okay. That same person that was holding the money is now holding them. And if you, and only you, can get there and do it, if you don't get there in the next 5 minutes to save them, they will be kidnapped, taken, tortured, and killed. What are you going to do?
Yeah, you're giving me an impossible choice. I have to go through. I have to find a way.
I thought you don't have enough time, or you're afraid your body won't hold up, or whatever else. Whatever people say, I'm depressed, I'm distracted, I have ADHD, and you present them with a situation.
The need and the necessity is not, the framework of the need is not there, which is why all the excuses fill in the gap. But the moment you change the framework to say, well, this is an impossible choice. You have to do this. There's no need or want here. It's you must.
We have to find a purpose to pursue, or all we have left are our imperfections and problems to focus on. And so obviously you're going to protect and do whatever it takes, including, like that, putting your life in danger, and probably going to take your life in the attempt to keep that from happening. So how do we duplicate that in other areas of our lives where all the other stuff just fades in the background and is a condition of the fact that we don't have clarity of what matters to us? Life is not made unbearable by our circumstances, but only a lack of meaning and purpose. It is not. We will walk on coals to get what we want when it matters enough. So the key is first of all, what the hell matters to me? And at a level that I'm willing to do whatever it takes to get to that situation that I desire. But we're being cued in a way that literally is the opposite of that, which now creates even more self-defeating thinking. And it's maddening to watch. Like when I flip through Instagram or whatever, and there's all these things like, do this, stop doing this. If you want to be happy, do these 10 things, etc. And it's all exactly opposite of what Sinek describes, which is it's outside in type of growth, development, progress. It's not sustainable. Well, sure, I can force myself to do something by, creating an environment that makes me do it, but it's not sustainable. And it sure as hell isn't fun or fulfilling.
Right.
So we have to identify who we are uniquely, what matters to us more than anything else, not a thing, because even a person is not what we're really connected to. It's the love, right?
I was going to say
connection.
Well, I was going to say, because let me use this as an example, because I think as I'm hearing you, I'm thinking, well, what are those answers for me? And I think when you ask, like, well, what matters to you? I think it's an obvious response would be like, oh, my family matters to me. But that's not what you're talking about, because that's the obvious question. And a lot of people say that their family matters to them, and yet they spend 60, 70, 80 hours a week working. And when they're home, they're completely not present. They take their relationships for granted. They, or all kinds of other things. And so if your family really matters to you, then why are you showing up? I think what you're talking about is, well, what is the stimulus that I care about? Or what is the feeling that I care to have? Or what is the connection that I care to have with that noun or with that object is what you're really talking about.
Yes.
So for example, sorry, go ahead.
It's okay. So I use often the simple analogy is when you go to the hardware store to buy a quarter-inch drill bit, what are you going to the hardware store to do? And they all go, well, duh, buy a quarter-inch drill bit. I went, no, you don't. That's not what you want. And then they start to get it and they go, oh, to make a quarter-inch hole. Okay, well, you just want a hole? Or you're gonna just stare at the drill bit and go, hey, I'm really glad I have this drill bit? No, you're gonna make a quarter-inch hole to put a quarter-inch fastener, take a picture of your family so that every time you walk by that, you feel loved, connected, and important. And right? So I'm not buying a drill bit for a drill bit. I'm not buying it just to make a hole. I'm buying it because I want to feel loved and connected. Like that's what it was all about in the first place. So therefore, yes, I need to do this and I need to go get a drill bit and use this tool. So that's the way we have to set up our lives in every area. We got to find out why we're buying the drill bit. And when we do, then what we do and how we do it is incredibly purposeful. It's on point. It's more efficient. It's more effective because we're selective. And whatever speaks against that state of being that we desire more than anything else, we notice instantly. Versus if I say, well, I want this by then. Well, like I want to lose 20 pounds in a year. Well, if I get some cake the first day, it's not going to throw me that off because I got, 2 years and 99% to get there. But if I say I want to be strong, healthy, and fit, well, then when I go to eat the cake, I notice instantly that doesn't support the state of being that I'm in. So anyway, back to I wanted to say that. Have you ever do you know Viktor Frankl?
I think you mentioned him before to me, but I don't know much about him and his. So
this is where history proves this, and he talked about this on point so well. He was an Austrian, neurologist, psychiatrist, and Holocaust survivor. And he actually came back and developed logos therapy, which the Greek meaning of that is that the Greek meaning is the will to meaning. And he wrote the book Man's Search for Meaning. But what he shows is, and statistical studies and clinical studies show, the extensive research shows the direct relationship between meaninglessness and criminal behavior, addictions, depression, et cetera. And that without it, what we do is it was what I was talking about initially, we fill that void with immediate pleasure or power or materialism or hatred or boredom or neurotic obsessions or compulsions. That's why people go charge the Capitol, why they kill people, which inevitably leads to what we're experiencing, which is individual and societal emotional and psychological disturbances. That's what's happening. That's why these mass shootings are happening. Someone is sitting in their house and they don't feel any meaning or connection. And so they're going to do something to get noticed and acknowledged. And so it doesn't make it excusable. It's just that's what's going on. And so when we believe we're here for a reason and we build our work and life around it, our purpose becomes bigger than any of our challenges. And he said, what we need is we don't need to look for he describes it as a tensionless state, meaning stop trying to say, I need to be less depressed, or it's not agree with people therapy or whatever. But if you really want to create sustainable change and do it from the inside out, we don't need to keep trying to mitigate or minimize and stop. Like, man, I just need to be more disciplined, or I just need to do this or that. That's what doesn't work, and that's what's being cued to us through all this other stuff. It's like, if you want to be more
like grind or wake up earlier, or
wake up early, have a morning routine. And I'm not saying some of those aren't good, by the way.
Yes.
But if they are good, they better damn well be directly connected with who you are and what matters to you, and even what works for you to trigger focus and the other things in discipline, the other things that are necessary to follow through on what you want. But it's got to start with what it is you want. Because he said, what we really need is we need a striving and even a struggling for goals worthy of ourselves uniquely, based on the calling that I have and the potential meaning I find that only I can bring to the world. Like when I have that, all this other stuff fades away. My problems, my difficulties, my self-defeating thinking fades into the background. And I
mean, I think what you're saying is that when you find your pull, You don't have to be pushed to do anything because the pull is so strong. And I think that I see people at a young age right now struggling with just getting out of bed.
Yep.
And what you're talking about is so far removed from that and I think that this is why people talk so much about working out or routine or exercise or discipline or whatever, because like making your bed or drink water, right? Like there's like, people are trying to make it simpler and simpler to quote unquote, get out of bed, mobilize, move, get out of your funk, right? Feel less of those things by taking one step at a time, or momentum. And you're taking it even farther of, well, once you get past that, once you start creating a little bit of that, you're still going to find that you're not really driven by purpose, because all you've done is create momentum. You've created action, not really purpose or pull. And that, I mean, I think that's what a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with. Does that make sense? Like from a life cycle perspective.
While you're going on this search, and by the way, it can be expedited by some good processes and doing
correct
as possible. While you're doing that, I'm a huge proponent of being as active as you can possibly be at learning what kind of disciplines and so forth work for me. All these
keep pieces, you on the path.
Then I get up, how much sleep I got to get, whatever it is, right?
Sure.
And so, because what does it do? Because again, I can sit around on a therapy couch for 10 years and try to figure out, what the world means to me and where I belong, et cetera. I'm not a proponent of that. I'm a proponent of going and engaging and having a podcast first time. I don't care. Like, this is going to help me find out more about me, right? Like, okay, let's do this, because it proves out my theory. It gives me proof of concept, because as I share it with you, I'm going, yeah, that is true. Or I go, I never thought about what Ashish said. I need to take that back and kind of sit with that and see what that means to me. And so that's where we grow and learn, and we can expedite that process the more active we are and engaged with people and things and endeavors and so forth. So I'm a proponent of basically a dual approach, like be as active in the how and what as you can. You trust your instincts as to where you feel like you do belong as you get clarity of who and why. And then when those meet, the sky opens up. That's what is so. And I've on Zoom watched that, literally the physical reaction of that clarity come, and it is unbelievable. I mean, stories it would just make your jaw drop. And it was literally this, and sometimes decades of work to try to find that very intelligent, people-driven people. And it just all comes into alignment. And that's really the key word. It's all about alignment, is aligning who I am with why I do what I do and how and what on every level, so that I'm more productive and feel more fulfilled. That's what it's about.
Let me take a 90-degree pivot. You work with a lot of companies also in, talking about purpose and trying to plan for the year. And we're kind of finishing up 2022 now, coming into 2023. What's on the mind of companies as they prepare into next year? Are we having similar conversations at the executive level of really driving the company to find focus and alignment and purpose with their people? What's on the mind of leaders today within the business?
So I've been doing the last few weeks, month or so, a lot of annual planning with companies, teams, organizations, so forth, entrepreneurs, and true to form, they're being cued to, and here's kind of a hack to be able to get a lot of what we talked about there quicker. And it actually can be in the context of your planning, is instead of allowing yourself, and this came from, again, years of making mistakes in this area and going like, okay, that didn't work. It created a lot of blowback that I was unintended consequences. I remember one guy, early on in my management life and having entrepreneurs that worked for me, and he said, Tim, if I could just do this, life would be great. And I'm like, oh, and of course, in my, genie in a bottle style, I'm like, well, I wanted everything for him that he wanted. And so since I can't just grant wishes, I decided to do the next best thing, which was help him staff up and figure out just how his strategies to, do what he did. He didn't make it the following year, but the year after that he did. And I'm talking about high level of productivity and being recognized nationally for it. Well, the problem is that created some unintended consequences that I, and he, most importantly, didn't need to experience. And so we'll call him Bill, is in my attempts to boost him to do that, it had significant blowback because he had to work like kind of what you said a little bit before, like a pack mule. And so what ended up happening was it ended his marriage to the woman of his dreams. And his 3.5-year-old son drowned in the pool because he didn't put up the fence, the safety fence he'd promised for 2 years. And so he blamed himself and it destroyed his marriage. And so I felt like an accomplice. Like I'm Jesus. Like, wait a minute.
Fascinating.
And so the problem is, years later, he and I were on a call together to go work with someone. And I was asking him, I said, what was that experience like, when you got that award? He could barely get out the words. His voice cracked and he looked at me and he said, the 10 minutes after I walked off stage was the worst 10 minutes of my life. Why? Because he realized what he'd sacrificed to get that. You see, he was in more distress after achieving the goal than he ever had been before. And so I should have probed deeper into the reasons and the meaning behind which he wanted to achieve this goal, as opposed to just said, okay, let's do what it takes to get it. And so what all this has taught me is how to learn how to plan for and set goals in a way that eliminate the unintended consequences of that. There is a way to plan for and achieve things that equip us to connect with the intense clarity of our conviction of who we are and what we believe, and then build out a process and skills necessary to significantly increase your productivity and create sustainable results. I just got done with a guy in Kansas City, and he looked at me and he said, I am scared to death that I will not be able to repeat what I did last year. And I said, well, what if it has nothing to do with repeating? He's like, what are you talking about? I said, so let's assume for a second you're already there. And I want you to close your eyes. I want you to imagine you just achieved that thing. How are you feeling?
Pretty good.
He said, which was his initial response. I said, no, dig deeper. How are you really feeling? He said, I'm feeling unstoppable. I'm feeling courageous. I'm feeling confident. And I said, so that's what you really want. You want to feel courageous and confident and all these other things. That's what you want. So why don't you plan everything you do looking through that lens? That every meeting, every call, everything you do, every staff meeting, no matter what you do, you're confident, you're courageous, etc. And I said, when you do that, do you think you'll have any problem reaching that again? He goes, hell no. I went, now you're onto something. So when we focus on our motivations, the numbers thrive. When we focus on numbers or things, our motivations struggle. And so we got to cue ourselves to the motivations, and through the lens of these motivations, one of mine was I want to be strong, healthy, and fit in my physical area of my life in 2023. And my truest desire is I'll be more fit and flexible than I've ever been, which is a pretty big stretch for going on a 60-year-old guy. But that's what I'm seeing through. But I could say, well, yeah, but I got a bum shoulder and I got this, right. And I don't know if I can finish the race because I had this before, right? Now all of a sudden all the problems start coming up. Well, instead, why don't you figure out when you win the half marathon, you don't just run it, you're going to fucking win it. And when you do that, how are you feeling when you hit that tape and you run through and you get your best time ever? Because whatever you get a hold of there that's real for you is why you're running the half marathon.
That's totally right.
Whether it's acknowledgement, whether it's achievement, whether it's, mastery, whatever those things are, that's it. So why don't we use that to cue ourselves and to focus ourselves consistently? Because here is the universal truth. We cannot act or perform in a manner inconsistent with the way we see ourselves. And so if I say I want to do this by then, I just instantly disassociated myself with what I want to be. I put a distance between it. Instead of right now, I'm courageous, confident, and focused. And I'm going to continue being that way in everything I do this year. And if I win the race, I will. And if I don't, it's okay too. Because like if your
that's
kid
a very important nuance, actually.
Like if your child comes and says, hey, I want to get straight A's. We can say, okay, now we're going to do everything we can. How are we going to get straight A's? We're going to study more. We're going to do this. Problem is you're cueing them wrong, because what's going to happen is when you go to pull out the report card and there's A's and 1 B, what's the child going to do? It's like, I failed. And of course, without a fully developed frontal lobe, they're going to say, I'm a failure.
Yeah.
And so instead, what I want to do is say, that's awesome, honey. When you get straight A's, how do you feel? How does that make you feel?
Makes me feel intelligent and smart and confident and brave and all of those things.
So then I'm going to make sure that that's how I'm cueing my child.
Every day up to that point.
Every single day around every conversation. If that's who you are.
Yeah, so there's no gap. There's no gap between.
I'm there now. This is my state of being. And honey, if you do that every day, for the most part, not perfectly, because we're human, so we allow for some slip-ups and some mulligans. But now we're cueing that child in a way, which, by the way, most of us weren't, right? Like a lot of us were like, you either do that or you're going to get in trouble. Like it was like, I don't get up, I have a choice. So that's what I'm talking about. And this is perfect for this time of year because everybody's thinking about what they want to accomplish. I'm saying, use your noun verb goal that you know, like I want to make $500,000. Okay, great. Why? What is that about for you? We're there, we're sitting here now, end of 2023. How are you feeling? You just banked $500,000. Now, what's interesting is a lot of times when they go through that process, they go, you know what, that sounds kind of small. Or like literally, they'd be like, when they're looking through a courageous, focused, and persistent, or whatever words they chose, they go, that seems kind of weak, actually.
But often it's not about the number or the money. What you're getting to is if you keep digging and keep asking the right questions, you're getting to a feeling. So maybe it's $500,000, maybe it's 100, maybe it's 1,000,000, maybe it's 5. But probably the feeling behind that is freedom or abundance or purpose or
absolutely,
maybe it's support or being able to contribute or whatever it is, right? It's the feeling that gives you, or that, right? But we get so lost in the now.
And here's a way for people to really practically apply it. Is basically we're talking about the points of speech. We're talking about nouns and verbs versus adjectives.
But that's a big difference.
A huge difference. Like instead of ever saying again, I want this and that, I'll use that first to trace it back to the source of energy. Like, what's that about for me? And when I get a hold of that, now that's my lens I look through. That's my focus. That's what I'm doing every day. And I actually, frankly, let go of this wish that I had, or goal, what I called that, right? Which I thought was the end all be all before, because that's all I knew and was cued to. No, that's not what I really desire. Right. And so why don't I cue myself daily, minute to minute, day by day, and internalize? I say take the 18-inch journey that it needs to take, which is from here to here, from head to heart. Like it's got to, if this is what really matters to you, you got to internalize that. And when you do, you'll never even have to plan around it again. You'll just keep acting the way that you are based on, and that's true to who you are. And it's literally adjectives versus nouns. But there's a process for that that's way simpler than people use. But when they get there, the meaning of that achievement is so much more poignant, so much greater. Because it is literally the culmination of your state of being. And it's in and of itself means nothing. It just meant like, I just did that because that I acted true to who I am. And I achieved greatness in this area that mattered to me.
Well, we talked going back to the very beginning of this conversation. We talked about being messy, right? The journey of purpose can be messy. And by thinking like this and asking these questions, I mean, I'm thinking through a lot of things as you're talking today of like how much more efficient I would be with my energy, with my attention, with my actions, by asking those questions earlier on, by creating that awareness. Even if you don't know what your actual purpose is, but to like get clear on how you want to feel, what are the adjectives, you know, yeah, really fascinating. I love the framework, and I'm glad people had a chance to hear this at this time of the year, because it is important as we go into the next year. And there's a big, people talk about all the time that goal setting, people fail at all their goals by the end of January, right? Because they're head goals and not heart goals. So I really appreciate you creating a framework for people to ask these questions. For you, what does a rich life mean to you, Tim?
Well, thanks for asking that. When I listened to the introduction of some of your other podcasts, and I thought about the word rich, and I thought about what a rich life really is. It's just a great word for the depth of, fulfillment and, just the feeling of richness, et cetera. And so money doesn't even come to mind. Not that I don't like money, but it's like, it just felt so, So I'm sorry, I want to answer your question. Just remind me again what the question was.
What does it mean to live a rich life for you?
Yeah. To live a life consistent with who God made me to be and what my unique strengths, talents, and passions are that align with my values and what I value. And so if I do that the best I can, not perfectly, but the best I can, then on my deathbed, I'm going to be like, I lived a rich life. I'm not going to wish that I made more money or those noun verb things. I am going to wish that I lived according to those states of being that meet my deepest needs, to feel connected, to feel loved, whatever those things are. And when you live consistent with that, you will live a rich and abundant life. Most people live their lives by accident, by default. And it's the true joy and fulfillment comes when we live based on who we are on purpose and by design.
Well, I've known you for only a short amount of time, and you're made for this work, and you were fulfilling your purpose, and I honor you for setting the example and doing this work, because I know you do your own work yourself. You're not just preaching to your clients, and right. Just I'm glad we were able to have the conversation. If people want to reach out to you, Tim, and connect and ask you more questions, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Bass Consulting, bass like a fish, consulting @me.com, me.
Tim at Bass Consulting?
Just Bass Consulting @me.com.
Okay, there you go. Well, Tim, I really honor you. I appreciate you being here today, and thanks so much, man.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ashish.